business is item A1, reconsideration of resolution 2012-27.
So you need to take it back, right? You take it back. Your meeting. Your meeting.
So we have we've approved the motion to reconsider resolution 2012-27. Is there any discussion from council? Councilor Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two, maybe three items. The first is, and I'll just name them and then come back and talk about it. The first is roles and responsibilities. Next is communication, and then after that, maybe money. After our budget workshop this afternoon, I thought I better add the money part. And I wanted to just address roles and responsibilities because in some emails and in press and so on, maybe there's a misunderstanding of what people do. In the city council, we're all independent people. We all have differing ideas. But at the end of the day, we come together and we find a way to cooperatively agree on things to accomplish for the good of the city and the citizens. And that doesn't mean that we have to all agree on each kind of thing, but that we work to come up with a cooperative spirit. We're not here to push our own agendas. We each have maybe our own little special perks and things that we like, but that's not what our job is to do here. So I want to make sure that's understood, that there is some feeling that's being circulated that people are obstructionist or something like that. That's not the point of what we do, and that's not why somebody signs up for this job. And that there's kind of a hysteria being circulated about what, numbers are flying around, and it's like there's a spirit being whipped up that so-and-so is against this and against that. No, we can disagree, but at the end of the day, our purpose is to get things done in a satisfactory manner. Now, the second thing is communication. I don't like to come home from a trip and find facts that I've never seen printed in the newspaper. And I'm hoping that we can maybe work on the lines of communication a little better. I've never spoken with these gentlemen, the Horrocks representative who's here this evening, and I've only talked with Jerry on the phone, and I've had questions, and they've been very cooperative and helpful, as has Mr. Davies. But there are a lot of facts. The information that we've got here tonight, you can see that it's even more complicated than the documents that you read on the LTAC website. It's a complicated project, and there's a lot to take into account. And I think that we are here to make decisions based on facts, not hysteria that's spread around. And if we get facts in the newspaper rather than people circulating it to ourselves, then it makes it really hard to make a proper decision. So I'm hoping that we can kind of work on the communication issue, that withholding facts or making sure only some of us receive the facts, that doesn't help the decision-making process for us. And I'm not speaking to anything in particular, just in general. And I think I was most irked by seeing things in the newspaper that don't agree with, these figures are different from the figures I was given. They're different figures. We need to get to the bottom of some of the details. And then, of course, the third item is money. We listened today to the fact that the city is running in the general fund a $760,000 deficit, and ways that we're going to need to be creative to fix that so that we're not constantly getting into our reserve funds. And so these are not simple kinds of things that we're tasked with. So that the facts that are available about this project become important, that we're all talking about the same ones, that we're talking with the same language, and that we're not making statements that are fantasy. So that's kind of my soapbox, and I have a lot of questions that I had asked the guests here this evening. Do you want to have somebody else speak? I mean, I've got some things I want to ask. Do you want to move along with some of the other people
If
first?
it's specific to
Yeah, they're specific.
approval of the state-local agreement for
Right.
Southwest Snake River Avenue Intersection Improvement Project 6-124?
They are specific.
Okay.
One of the things, gentlemen, that has been implied, inferred, stated, is that if we don't sign the agreement, then we will lose our place in line and we will have to pay some money back. I don't think that that's generally how it works, and so I would like to understand for sure if we say we need to maybe defer this project for, this coming fiscal year, by the way, which is where this project was it was for 2013, the latest version, right? I know it moves around quite a bit.
Mayor and council, the project was at one time split out between 2 fiscal years, 2013 and 2014.
Yeah.
And that was basically a year ago. It was in April of last year when it got moved to 2012.
And if we, and I'm on the MPO, so I understand the implications of the lineup of projects in the plans. But if we were to defer it, and it looks like it's been through quite a history at various times of, for one reason or another, either our problem or other organizations who are involved, one reason or other, funding has been an issue. If we were to defer it from signing this, say, tonight to just, I don't know, any given amount of time, what are the exact implications? Or I guess first, what would be the process?
Well, Mayor and council again. It's in the STIP, or what used to be known as the STIP, now the ITIP, and that's a 5-year program. And then there's a year after that called preliminary development. So now that this project was scheduled for construction in 2012, if it doesn't go in this fiscal year, 2012, it has to move back. And according to the committee rules, the STP Urban Committee, it goes back to preliminary development, which means it moves back to that year past the 5-year. It'll go back to 2018, basically. Now, there's always a chance that if there's an opportunity, we can move it ahead. But the rule in the committee is if you don't make the fiscal year that you're scheduled for, then you go back. And if I wanted to move it to 13, I can't, because 13's full of other projects, and 14's full of other projects, 15's full. The program's just packed with projects.
And yet, other cities might have the same problem. I mean, it's not cast in stone that we wouldn't be able to be in another year, because there may be other cities who, like in the past, in the history that you've given us, other things have dropped out, and so on.
You're right. It is cast in stone, well, not stone, but on paper. But it goes back to PD, and then it waits there. Then if there's an opportunity, I can move it ahead.
Right.
So
Okay.
I never know when those are going to happen.
Yeah.
That's why we meet quarterly with that committee.
And as a matter of fact, when we were down at AIC, I was talking with the counselor from Moscow, and at first he was trying to say, oh, well, you've got to proceed with the project. He says, no, wait a minute, we want it. Drop out, we want your slot, because, and I said, well, how do you have the money? And he said, well, yeah, we've been saving. And I think that's one of the things that's bothered me. I haven't seen how we've been saving like they did for the 161,000, our part of the, it's not your problem, it's more ours. Have we been doing that? Have we been setting aside the money for this project that's our share? And why not if we haven't been? So why then are we surprised, or, all of a sudden we get this to sign when we say, well, where's the saving that we've been saving up?
The funding, the $161,000 that's been referred to, Those funds have been allocated and are in the budget this year to pay for that cost. So that's the city's contribution to the project. The rest of the money, of course, is federal pass-through funds that go through
Right, the rest.
ITD to us.
And is this the budget where we've got the $760,000 deficit?
No, that's the current year budget,
The current one, okay.
current year budget.
The figures, but it's still a may. I mean, it's possible to still defer it.
Councilwoman, yes, it's possible to
Yeah.
defer. Sometimes there's not a choice and projects get deferred. It's possible, it's just not pleasant.
Well, in this whole history, and actually, thanks for bringing this, because I've read all the documents on the website, plus the kinds of things that you steered me to, looked at all the simulations and everything, and this breaks it out really well, and it's a checkered history of this project, that's for sure, that there have been lots of different organizations who had lacked funding and then got refunded and that type of thing, so it's been pretty painful sounding thing to work on. Now, let's talk about the money, because the figures that were quoted in the newspaper were quite different from the figures that you gave me. So what's tell me about the cost. He had quoting the city manager, $924,104. And the figures, .02. And I had something quite different. Not quite different, but they were.
Okay, so before the state-local agreement goes out, I work on a spreadsheet to kind of distill the funding, because the way the federal aid project works is you take the total project cost and
Of this phase.
right, of the
Yeah.
design work and of the estimated construction work and the construction engineering, all those costs, and then the cities agreed to pay 7.34% of that cost. So it's built on an estimate, the engineer's estimate for the construction, but the city comes up with 7.34% of that. And that takes into account the $10,000 the city spent originally when that state-local agreement for design was signed.
The 2004 one?
Right. It takes into account cost if ITD works on the project. It takes into account LTAX cost, the engineering cost. It's all added together, 7.34% of it. There are deductions that I mentioned. And then it was the state-local agreement came out with the city's remainder for the match was going to be that $160-some thousand. The $920,000 was the total cost spent so far. That includes federal costs and the local costs for the design process. And so that's what Federal Highways says. If you don't construct the project eventually, then they're basically saying, well, that you didn't construct the project, but you spent this to develop it, so we'd like that federal money back. So the amount that the city would have to pay back to Federal Highways would be that 7.34% of that $920,000.
7.34 less than you'd take our match out
Right.
of the 920,
Yeah.
so it'd be 800 some odd.
850.
It'd be 92.66%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But, and now, one of the things that I also noted in the newspaper article was quoted as, even there, I think it was a may, and definitely in this agreement here, it did not say that that it was absolute. In other words, it sounded like there were, as with any of these kinds of big projects, there are possibilities. It doesn't say you absolutely have to repay this money. It was a may. May exist.
Councilwoman, Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But I've worked at LTAC for 11 years, and this has happened once before in my recollection. And it almost happened twice before. In Jerome, they had a project that got really old, and then Federal Highways sent them a letter and said, you have to pay back this amount, and they begged with Federal Highways and said, no, we'd still like to build it. So they did build the project. That's what would happen if, when the 10 years expire, then Federal Highways would send a letter, or I don't know if it'd come from Federal Highways or ITD, and they'd say, you need to repay that money. And then you could make an argument to Federal Highways and beg for forgiveness.
And let's see, there was one, oh, yeah, now reading, you talked about the 10 years, and you suggested that it started with the original local state agreement. And yet, reading through the chronology here, there were times when it was like the federal government's problem and not any problem of the local organization. Why would, in other words, things got delayed because there was no funding type example. Why then would the 10 years still be ticking when it wouldn't be our problem? Who determines that? Is there any leeway, for example, in
I believe that Federal Highways determines that, and they probably have a little alarm clock on this project. And when the 10 years goes up, I bet we'd get the letter. And then that might be part of a good argument that, you know, we were delayed by the funding.
right, a couple of different times from different agencies type thing. I think that's most of it. Let me just check. Go ahead.
Councilor.
Thank you.
Mr. Platt.
Glad to talk to you face-to-face. I spent a little time on email with you, and I read a lot of the LTAC grants during the course of the year. One of the things I find interesting in this whole process is we work really hard to make sure everybody is tuned in to the fact that when there are some responsibilities when you sign up for these things, and that you keep the process going. And there are a couple of results on the other end that I think I've seen, and I want to know if I'm misinterpreting that. But does the federal government just sit there and hold the $2.3 million and just hold it for 10 years and then say, well, we've got it here, now we could give it to you? Or is there a balancing act that goes out there and there are other people standing in line who would like to get that money?
Well, when the project's put into a fiscal year, then it's reserved for that project. So if the project's delivered in that fiscal year, then that money's reserved for the city of Lewiston, that $2.3 million or whatever it is. If Lewiston can't or decides not to go ahead with construction at this time, then another entity from the STP Urban Committee could use that money if they had a project that was the same size and ready to go. And I don't know if that would happen. And if the MPO Urban Committee doesn't use the money, then ITD would try to use it before the end of the fiscal year. So the Idaho Transportation Department would use that money, but only if they had a project that would fit, you know, that $2.5 million amount and was ready to go. If ITD can't use it, there's a chance it goes out to some other state. So, does that answer your question?
Right. I just wanted to make a comment, if I may, as a follow-up, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate having you here this evening, and I'm hoping if you have some things to offer to us as well, that you will do that. I think all of us up here have our opinions, and they're obviously a little bit diverse. But one of the bottom lines for me is that LTAC has done something great for Lewiston in terms of this kind of leverage of $161,000 with a leverage of $2.3 million. Makes some sense to me. It's gas tax money. It's money that comes back to us. I think to say something else is to openly admit that you don't want the taxpayers to get their money back. And I think that's what happened here last week, and or a couple weeks ago. I think that if I were running for public office and I made that statement, I'd get shot. Very frankly, I just can't imagine that we wouldn't want our own money back. And I can't imagine that we would not want construction jobs in this community. I've heard people cry and cry and cry over lots of money and that we're doing weird things spending money. This isn't weird. The accident rate in that roundabout area is one of the highest in the state. 49 to 50, one fatality in there in the time period as well, recorded. That sets it really, that's really set a tone for that particular intersection. I think what we're doing here is just making good common sense. And I think the kind of vote that we had the other evening was not common sense. It might have been conservative, and it might have been fiscally responsible in a way, saying let's don't ever spend anything. But sometimes that just doesn't make one bit of sense. It doesn't in my home budget. It doesn't when I fix my cars. It doesn't when I fix up my house. You have to make some choices. What do you leverage when? I just think that what we've done here is stepped into a quagmire. I think we have a lot of projects in the future on that MPO list that I don't want to see endangered. Maybe other people want them endangered, and they'll all scratch their head and say, you can't make that comment, Ortman. But I'm going to say it right out loud. I want to stay in the federal line. I want that gas tax money to come back to Lewiston. Our citizens paid it. They deserve to get it back, and we don't deserve to take it away from them. Yes, they paid the money to us in sales tax, but we're using it well, smartly, if we approve this agreement.
Counselor, discussion on the motion for reconsider. Counselor Daniel.
Well, first, before I ask my question, I'm just gonna say it's always good to be fiscally conservative, and I'm proud to be that. But I'm not gonna get into partisan debate with you. But I'm gonna ask: has our city attorney had a chance to review the pertinent documents to this, and did she concur the amount or the approximate that there would be?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I don't usually review it for the amounts. I leave those to the engineering people who know what things cost. I have reviewed the agreement for content, and I don't see any problems with it. But in terms of amounts, I'm not an engineer. I don't do line items, I'm not the accountants. I leave that to the engineers. They have reviewed those amounts. I simply review the agreement to make sure that that's an agreement that the city council can sign.
Counselor Daniel, what amount are you alluding to?
No, I was just asking the city attorney if she had a chance. Does she agree with the fact that we may have to pay back funds? I understand there's a gray area with the whole possibility depending on.
If I might,
Mr. Bennett.
the dollar amount of $924,104.02 was provided directly to me by Jim Carpenter from the Idaho Department of Transportation in Lewiston. And I'll just quote the original agreement from 2004 with ITD, section Roman numeral I, subparagraph 6. If the project is terminated by the sponsor prior to completion and the sponsor has been reimbursed with federal funds for preliminary engineering and/or right-of-way acquisition, the sponsor shall repay all federal funds.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor? Counselor Stevenson?
I did have a couple more questions, and one of them was in regards to the accident rate. I wanted to get back to that, and I had asked you about that, and I think I asked Mr. Davies. And I read through the documents, and the documents that were available were the project area and gave all the engineering studies and so on. And I asked specifically for any data that showed that at that intersection, there were particular number of accidents or fatalities or anything like that. And what was the answer? Because you were going to look it up. What you had was generic. And it was-
Right.
Yeah.
Can I defer to Brian
Oh,
on this?
okay. Because I could find nothing that said that at that intersection specifically, there was a huge number. It was in the whole project area, which is pretty big.
Yeah, again, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah, but for the record, Mr. Foote is principal of Horrocks Engineering and is the head of the design team for this project. Is that
yeah, I
accurate,
was,
sir?
yeah, I'm project manager for the environmental document that we did here and for the design. I've been with this project for the history of the project.
Gray
Um,
hair.
Lost a little hair. But, when we first started the project, we did a safety evaluation as part of the work we did for the environmental assessment that we produced for the entire corridor. When we looked at it, I don't believe we looked at the intersection specific. We looked at the entire corridor.
Right.
The environmental assessment we did was for about a 2-mile stretch of Snake River Avenue, and then it also included about a mile of Southway. And so we looked at the entire, I think we looked at Snake River Avenue and Southway separately. The data we pulled was from, again, we started this in 2005. So we pulled the data of the previous 4 years to that, so I believe it was 2000 through 2004. And what we got was we didn't find a statistical, it wasn't statistically significant as far as the number of accidents. But keep in mind, this project is a capacity project. Safety is a concern, always a concern when we do one of these projects. When we spend this kind of money, we want to make it safer. But the reason we're doing this project is it's a capacity project. As engineers, when we started this, we take a look at the traffic volumes and we went out to the year 2030. And we look at how much traffic is going to be on that corridor, and what we know is that existing intersection is going to fail sometime before 2030. And so in order for that intersection to work, to handle the traffic that's going to be there, there's got to be some improvements there. And that's what the purpose of this project is to create an intersection and a corridor that will accommodate those in a safe manner. We also want to make it safer.
Well, and I think that's an important issue because many of the things that are stated about this intersection is that was was unsafe, it had a lot of accidents, and what you've just said corroborates my contention is that that wasn't the point. The data did not show that. It was a capacity issue.
May I respond to that, too? You're exactly right. The project is a capacity project. That's why we're doing it. But we want to make it safer. Now, the data we looked at was 2000 to 2004. If we were to go pull data now and look at it, it may tell us a totally different answer.
Yeah.
On a road like this, if you have one fatality, and I understand there was a fatality, I think that was previous to the data we pulled. So depending on when you look at it, if you have a really bad accident in that intersection, if we've had one since then, it could totally change that. And that happens. As traffic goes up, the safety problems tend to kind of amplify as volumes go up.
And I noticed in one of the slides, in one of the summaries, it stated that originally when you did the study, there were 3 main types of designs, and the roundabout was only number 3. That number 1, I believe, was a T-type intersection, and I forget what number 2 was. And I noticed that when you, in the simulation, you had the pedestrians crossing a ways away.
Mm-hmm.
It looked like it would be hard for pedestrians to cross that traffic at those, where they had the little ants, showing where they were. Tell us about that.
You're talking about the video simulations of the roundabout?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want me to? Can I plug this in and?
Oh, you got it? Okay,
I
great.
Can I
be able to? I don't know, I'd have to get Jason to show you how to.
If I plug it right in here, can I access a file?
Go for it, try it.
Let me see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
Yeah.
I think Jackie
If
knows
it
that.
doesn't blow up.
Jackie can do it too.
But it looked like it would be hard for pedestrians to cross where it looks like they have to cross. Now, how come they ended up being down, in those two spots?
Okay, if I could pull this up. Well, I just stuck the thing in here, and I need to find the
See, I'm
files.
such a good shill for you. It just happened, you pulled out your,
How do you get to the?
one of the things while he's getting that,
There it is
one of
right
the
there.
things
It's
that
removable.
I wanted to comment on was that
Maybe that's
this,
it.
this project has
Oh, yeah,
been
that's it.
in the works
Maybe
for
it's
so
that.
long
Maybe it is.
that I think it's prudent for the city council, and I don't want us to be taking heat
Will it
for
open up?
being prudent. It's
Okay.
prudent for
Yeah.
the city council to review projects that have gone on for such a long time when there are important budgetary changes like we have.
this, yeah.
Because
If I
when
just
they
start
first
this
started,
one,
we were flush and everything was great. And now we're going to need to scramble to take care of some deficits that we have. And so I think that it's important for us to look at how we can offset the project with some other budgetary considerations and not just blindly carry on. Got it?
Well, it's showing right here on the
Oh, okay.
screen, but it's
Where's-
not.
where's-
There
Oh,
you
there
go.
it goes,
Oh,
there
yeah.
it goes. All right, what this is a video simulation of the traffic model that we created for this project. This was actually shown to City Council some time ago when we briefed City Council. I think it was back in 2006. What this is showing is kind of the current configuration of the roundabout. It's a two-lane roundabout. The traffic volumes that we're simulating here, I believe, were year 2030 traffic volumes. So these are the projected traffic volumes that you'd expect to see in the peak hour in 2030. One of the things that's important when you're doing a roundabout is that you model in pedestrians. And you
Oh,
can
there's
see,
one starting.
you can see right there, there's a pedestrian coming across.
Now, see, it looked a little dicey to me.
Yeah, and this is typically how you do roundabout. And now this is, keep in mind, this is a very rough graphical simulation. Typically, what we do with pedestrians in roundabouts is we have them cross about 2 to 3 car lengths back from the roundabout. This is typically how it's done. One of the reasons we like to factor in pedestrians to our traffic model is because the cars actually have to slow down and wait for pedestrians, so it affects the overall operation of the intersection. We actually went out and did a pedestrian count at this intersection, and then the pedestrians we put in here, we actually trumped up the volume by about 6 times, I believe, what is actually there, just to see how sensitive it was. And so you can see that occasionally there's pedestrians coming across and the cars will slow down and wait. One of the nice things about a roundabout is the pedestrian has a refuge island out in the middle. It's really hard to see. But so you only really worry about one direction of traffic you cross, and then you've got a refuge island in the middle that you can wait for another gap or for a car to stop, and then you can cross that.
Now, did you show in your pedestrians, because a lot of people bicycle there, like a mom and with a bicycle and 3 kids with, little bikes, is there enough room for them to get across?
Yeah,
Out
in
in
the
that middle there?
center island, and again, this is kind of a rough graphical representation, but I believe we've got about 8 feet of refuge area in the middle, if I could remember right. So there's plenty of room for them to get out there and wait. Some of your more experienced riders will ride right through the roundabout. But
No.
yeah, if you were pulling a trailer with some kids in it, you'd probably get over on the sidewalk and cross like a pedestrian would. And in this area, a lot of that pedestrian traffic is probably going to be working its way down to the river trail or
Right.
to
Yeah.
the levee trail anyway. But yeah, there was a lot of thought that went into to the roundabout as far as the design of it, and then as we compared it, you're right, we looked at 4 different intersection options here. There were 3 variations of a signalized T intersection, and then 1 roundabout. The roundabout actually had the best overall performance. As traffic engineers, we give a level of service, and they have A through E. This actually had performance